Hey guys, so we're doing something a little different today. We are listening to a podcast from my good friend Jean-Yves Hauer, who runs CoWorking Europe. CoWorking Europe is a annual conference. The next one is in Berlin in November. You should totally be there. I will be. But Jean-Yves and I are working together on a special project called C20. And C20 is where we are helping change the perception of the term co-working around the world by banding together 20 of the top brands in the world. Check out thec20.co and have a listen to this podcast. It's a little special break in from our normal juicy content, and we will be back with more juicy content after this. But I wanted you guys to check this out. So I hope you enjoy.
Zoe Ellis-Moore. I hope you're well.
Yes, very well. It's very hot at the moment. So yes, yeah.
So you are the first guest of this new format that we launch as C20, and C20 is a collaboration between GCUC and CoWorking Europe. As you might know, GCUC and CoWorking Europe are the biggest organizer of conferences and events and communities around the co-working industry. And GCUC being in the UK, Australia, North America mainly, and we being mainly in Europe. A little bit in the Middle East. We had some action in Africa and India back in the days. And the goal is to indeed share those content, share those insights, and also the goal of C20 now, which is our new common initiative, is to change the perception of co-working outside the co-working industry, as there is still a lot of misunderstanding about what we do and who we are. And the focus on co-working is just for freelancers, which it is, but not only. And it will be also part of what we are going to discuss today, if you're okay.
Amazing. I'm totally honored to be the first guest. Wow, thank you. I was like,
So, first of all, can you introduce yourself briefly and tell us who you are?
yes, of course. So Zoe Ellis-Moore, founder of Spaces to Places. And as the name might sort of insinuate, it's all about how you turn spaces, empty, soulless places into places with people, purpose, and meaning. So a lot of our work with clients is really understanding the market there to really know what the end customers want as well. And very much specialist in the flex office sector only. But our key ones, we don't do anything operational. It's more about data and research is one of our super strengths. But then the other angle is linking it all with marketing and brand as and scaling a business.
And so we've been knowing one another for quite a while now, and I can say that Zoe is one of the best experts I know about market and evolution of demand. And we have this discussion because you released like 2 or 3 weeks ago your new report, which is called From Hype to Operational Real Estate. Yeah, please show it again.
Yeah, it was.
So we'll have the link in the description of the episode, of course. And this report is striking because, as the title says, you say that we went beyond the empty messages and the promises and the hype about co-working that we heard about. Maybe we participated into this. John knows about co-working, will revolutionize everything and revolutionize the office expertise and the practices in the workspace market. But what you are saying in this report is now it's happening. It's there. It's not just something that we are forecasting. It's happening. Of course, it's happening in the UK where you are based. And for those who are looking at what's happening in the co-working industry around the world, we know that London and the UK is likely the most mature market in the world. So, first of all, I will mention two numbers you are listing in this report. One is managed office which are managed, or workspace which are managed, grew by 895% since 2019. And what you call serviced office, and I will let you make give us the definition you have about it, grew by 49% over the same period. So what does it mean? What does this number tell us about the growth of the industry nowadays, and why do you split them?
Yes, well, I think the sector, I suppose, in some ways, is quite confusing with lots of different products and stuff. So I suppose my passion for the sector, there's both. I always like turning frustrations. I've got lots of frustrations in the sector in some ways, going, okay, it's been around 50 years and we're still sort of working things out, and also people sort of think the whole sector is WeWork and Regis, and still that's sort of, I think, this historical side there. So
Yeah,
hence that's what people always expect and think they know the sector, but as we know, and I think that's where my fascination is. It's so much more, and we've got so many different products and how it's cut up and how people are sort of purchasing offices, and in some ways I'd say we are part of just the office market, and it's a different way of consuming offices, whether you want it sort of much more the co-working end, much more pay-as-you-go sort of service, whether you want it more, I would say, subscription model, where it's much more a serviced office where you're signing up and you become a member, so that's subscription service. And then we've got this new category I see much more, it's a hybrid model between a traditional office lease and, say, a serviced office, where businesses of, say, much more sort of even sort of 30 to, say, 100 employees are much more looking for, I would say, an office that's managed. They want their own front door, but we've always talked about this term, space as a service. They want
mm,
that service element. They want it delivered for them. They just don't want that taking on a lease and having to manage everything themselves. They want that much more hospitality there, and they're willing to pay a premium for it. So that's where we've seen the growth, really, that I see the changing dynamics of this industry. And suddenly we're sort of seeing much more a tipping point. In London, we always talked about sort of 10% of the market is the flex office market. We're seeing this really changing because the bigger players as well, what I call sort of brand lords, these ones that have traditionally been pure office landlords or property players, coming into the market and adding on much more this operational layer. So that's where we're seeing the changes. And to bring it bigger picture, I suppose, where that frustration for me is coming from a lot is looking at operational real estate. We've seen much more maturity, quicker maturity into sort of that for institutional capital of sort of hotels, build to rent sector, student accommodation. So that's more where I feel sometimes that as a co-working sector we've lagged behind because we haven't, been talking the same language and we've confused everything. So hence why sort of C20 is such a delight, because it's going, actually, if we can all join together as a sort of massive collaboration, we help the whole industry. And I think that's what's, it's already quite a fragmented industry. Property industries are fragmented, but by joining forces and aligning some of data and sharing, we help each other. So delighted with C20 as well, but hopefully give that context. But yeah,
yeah.
the service side is still growing, but we're just seeing more and because it's the larger square footage, we're seeing the likes of the bigger landlords really entering into this managed space, and especially in London, and it's happening rest in Europe as well. But London seems to lead the way, and that's one of the key indicators that we're seeing, and that we have got like GPE sharing data showing how they've really made it work as operational real estate, achieving sort of over £200 per square feet. So yeah, we're moving on at quite a rapid pace now.
Okay. So, of course, and what you mentioned is exactly the purpose of C20, the initiative. We saw the same thing. We say that we are hitting a glass ceiling as an industry because of the lack of common vocabulary and consensus about what is what, and the ability also to have the same ability to share information about what we do, what we are, and the differences. The same way as you mentioned, it was the hotel managed to make it very easy to read. Perfectly what's the difference between a 2 or 3 stars hotel as opposed to a palace hotel or Airbnb, etc. And here we have been struggling with people using different wording and vocabulary. And credit to you, you have been working hard to really try to give us clear definitions of the different categories. And as you mentioned, I won't agree so much about service office. I don't like it, but I see how easy it is to use, definitely. And the other thing is also, of course, as people from continental Europe, and I think our US friends also were listening to us, are wondering why this is happening in the UK now, or especially in London, and why, according to you, this is something that is accelerating in the British market nowadays and in London. How do you explain that? And we can speak a little bit also about some information you shared in the report about who the shareholders are of those operators that we are mentioning.
Yes, I suppose backing up slightly, I totally agree. The two people, the sort of parties that are really confused is the end user, businesses or individuals, and then the other ones of our sort of stakeholders is those investors in some ways. And actually, that's where using their language, they've still defined it as serviced offices. They still use that term, like was going through some investor sort of reports and different things, and they're still categorizing it as a serviced office, and that's how they see it. So that's one of the contexts there. I suppose what it is really how does the sector grow and mature? And we're seeing different signs happening to go, actually, we're in this growth phase. How do we move to maturity? And some of these signs are institutional capital coming into the market. So this year in the UK, we've seen 3 transactions in the last 6 months. We've had Argyle, we've had with CBRE as well. So with Industrious, and so previously we had also the other one was Gilbanks last year, of course. At the end of last year, we've had WeWork and Yardi. So suddenly, there's a few more transactions happening. It wasn't happening prior to that. So I suppose that's the other one where I see it going, actually, there's a few more players coming into this market. We're seeing the other signs like growth of providers. So we put in our report some of those leading ones, the top 36 in the market. We're now seeing them growing at such rapid pace and sort of adding on new locations. So that's another sign that they've got scale. So scale's coming into the market. We've also seen a lot of the data, and this is where managers quite interesting, user demand increases. And so Savills have got some great data sort of saying,
work there. Yeah.
Saying
but how do you explain that? Okay, I understand maybe capital flow goes faster, so there is less restriction maybe, or is more available in the UK maybe, and then it's invested into our industry. But does it explain? Is it enough to explain this pace that is so rapid in the UK as opposed to other markets, or do you see something else? Is it the density of London, how appealing the ecosystem in London is? But it's not only London, obviously, because we see that in Manchester, for instance, you see the same trends happening. So what's your explanation beyond that?
It's probably more, I suppose the point is we've got a bit more data on London specifically. And so, that's the one where we still don't have enough data in this industry, and lots of other initiatives like the Wind Group and, to get more data. So there's still, so hence why with the data side, that's hence why it's sort of pushing it there on that purpose, there. Thinking about sort of what you're talking, sort of why London, why, different things there. It's also, if you think you're an investor, they're not getting those triple and net leases anymore. They're not getting the same returns as they get from a building. So they're now looking at how do they become more operational. So I think there's a wider property play here about operational real estate, to be quite honest, that hence investors are getting much more up the risk curve, but they want the higher returns as well. So hence that's why their change of appetites there as well. So that's happening across all different sort of sectors as well. So I think that's the other part that sort of plays in this, where they're like going, we've got a building, we need more returns. We want a total return of the value of the asset, but we want to also be creating an income streams as well. So it's the investors that are also changing with their appetite and understanding of just more operational real estate and making their assets swept much more. So those are the things, especially more savvy with institutional investors that are used to London markets and things. that's the bigger picture, I suppose, that's hitting
Yeah,
us all,
because
sort of dribbling
according
down.
to your report, it's not only that now you have those brand lords. I love those term you coined, speaking about landlords starting their own brand and trying to be good, and I'm sure a lot of them are, and in the co-working, in providing a proper co-working service. But your report says between 2019 and 2024, the percentage of management agreement grew from 9% to 41%. So almost half of the deal that I signed up between operators and landlords is no management agreement. So it's like it's firing on all cylinders now, this growth and this industry. Because if we take the brand laws, as you mentioned, a number of them, those operators who manage to now sign up deals with landlords who are ready to share the risk. Franchise is not growing fast. That's something you noticed as well. And interesting to have your opinion about it. So again, if we had the discussion 2 years ago, maybe we wouldn't have it such a rosy picture about the industry. So again, to speak about what is happening, what is the tipping point that you see, and how far can it go if we draw the line further towards the future?
So I suppose the interesting statistic there that you mentioned about management agreements, that's much more with Savills and deals being done and that have been recorded. And so we've done previous research that sort of says that the current state of the market, sort of still, I think it's 46% is lease of the bigger players with 10 or more locations. It's still the majority is lease, but we're really seeing that shift that the other so it's increasing and showing this operational increasing is the owner operators increasing and also sort of the partnership, the management agreements. In hindsight, in one of our reports, we should have had it in sort of about these much more, I would say, hybrid sort of leases or management agreements. We're seeing much more. It is linked to operational performance, turnover rents there, bringing in some metrics there. But that's where it's that joint partnership where trying to understand how the assets operating and joining in with partnerships and that risk and return side as well, moving up that curve in some ways. The least risky in some ways is much more that lease side. So that's where we're seeing that sort of operational side there. So some of those, I would say, key indicators that we put in the report that we're seeing it, is still a long way to go in some ways.
Yeah.
But the signs that this industry and where it's always the way sort of predicting the future and looking at other sectors and stuff and seeing their journey. So that's why we sort of analyze there going, what's these key sort of indicators on how we're going to see where it's moving. Other points, I think we've had some great annual reports coming out, the workspace group as well. So we've got sort of one's reporting GPE that just had their results out for the year. That's where we're getting some good data because most of the industry is sort of still privately owned. The data's not there for everybody to see and understand business models and what's going on. So I think that's the other one that's,
Speaking about workspace group, they were analyzing that the growth, they were seeing the growth of the market rather from SMEs and not so much from very small companies or teams or group, whereas that was the picture we had of what co-working was about in a not such a distant future, past. And so, do you see that as well? That can explain why now the provision of those services in higher capacity is driven because those SMEs nowadays, this is what they look for. They understood that they need the hospitality, the service around the facility they were using, and that's something that's a one game now for the industry, that those SMEs, at least in London, are aware that that's what the employees are looking for. That's what the CFO might consider as the best option, ultimately from also a cost perspective, and overall that everything is aligning at some to some extent nowadays, also for that kind of company demographic.
Yeah, and I would say if those workspace groups really fascinating, like 50% of their sort of client base, they don't, sit at rows of desks. They're not using space and they sell by the square foot. They don't set, they're not about desks and stuff. So people are much more using a space fit for their business. They might have cutting table next to desks, next to a photography studio. And so that's where I would say they're very much at how sectors are evolving fast and how, they're really close. I think, they're very close to their customers as well and different type, they've got such a mix of customer base, even more that sometimes when we look really central London, it is professional companies, much more desk based. So I think that's the one where we can take some of those wider trends. I think that's really fascinating with Workspace Group because they're talking about operational efficiency there. They're talking about really getting to know the different customer types there. So I think I enjoyed it, and they're aligning as well with operational real estate and saying that's how they see the future there. But they do some, yeah, I think you've read the book, breaking it down, those client types as well, and
Yeah,
some of those
yeah,
smaller ones, and looking at those trends on, what do people really want out of a space there as well.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
not necessarily prime. I think they're really fascinating. Working on campuses, they're much more a campus setup there with over 70,000 square feet of
Yeah,
space.
it's not so always expected from a company like this, which has been around for such a long time. It's so big at the end of the day, and they were really considering the human size of the thing or the environment as an added value they were bringing. And if you look at Workspace Group now and you look at the pictures, it definitely look like a modern co-working space, which it is, uh, colorful, enjoyable, daylight, etc. And which brings us back to the elephant in the room again, about the reluctance to use the word co-working. That's something which is something we have seen in the industry by big players say, okay, co-working is this, and to some extent, you go along with this, the saying that co-working is more for the open space and more the product size and not necessarily the industry itself. Whereas we know that on Google or in the broader audience, the word co-working or even the press, if you read an article in the New York Times or in Time magazine or any kind of mainstream media, they will speak about Regus as a co-working group, or IGB as a co-working group, or WeWork as a co-working group, because it's so easier to use this term than go into this landscape of 20 different words which are try to depict the same thing. So what's your take on that? I know that we are a small disagreement about it, but this to me, Workspace Group was typically this kind of example of, oh, they do everything to the perfection in terms of co-working approach, etc. But still, no, we are not co-working. How do you explain that?
Yes, and I do take it from more the customer's perspective, often that we find businesses just want space or they want an office. How, what sort of how it's cut off or, what product within the office sort of world, they're deciding sometimes between a lease to between managed or whether it's co-working, so I think that's where we sometimes forget the end user and what they're looking for. Do totally agree that people searching for co-working and trying to look at their intent is really confusing because people have so many different definitions of
Yeah.
co-working.
Oh,
So that's where it has
and
got a
we are
total
guilty.
muddle.
We
And
are
it is,
guilty of that.
yeah, I think that's where sort of it's, the amount of words we have for any Google ads and things like that, there's quite a few different ways that people are searching. Some are searching for office for rent and, and they do mean that they want all shared workspace, they mean co-working. There's so many nuances, but often I'm just looking at it, in some ways we're a subsector of the wider family of offices and, workspaces that people want. So I
Yeah.
sometimes find that elevating to the bigger market and understanding that's quite interesting because now I go around London and I see on signboards it's saying flexible leases and it's just like is a lease flexible everybody's now mashed the words that and what's plug and play, what's this, what's and different things. it's got marketing overhype.
Yeah.
So I've gone back the other way in some ways and going, actually, I'll use the word sometimes. It's like office, it's an office, somewhere you're going to work, or a workplace.
Yeah.
I've sort of gone, it's always the way full circle. And actually listening to the investors when they've kept on talking and going backwards in some way, saying it was a serviced office. I'm like, okay, if that's how you describe it,
We
in
need to
some
speak
ways.
the same language at the end. Yeah, indeed. Okay, I had also this question about and coming back to what we mentioned about the categories. Service office, as you describe it, service office, managed office, working to some extent. Are their providers the same? We see that, for instance, not all and some others, they are more focused on the managed office side. Service office, we mentioned some operators who might go in smaller players who might call themselves co-working space, although for us, you read about it, it's all about co-working, for instance. So how do you see it? Can it be the same operators providing different level of product at the end of the day according to size of the customer, or no, you would expect more segmentation also in that regard, that everybody will focus on its part of the market?
I think there's some differences. There's some real providers that do have real differences, and some that are across the board, and I think that's the
Yeah.
one where you look at WeWork, that you can get an individual pass and then you can be a massive corporate and take space there. So I think that's the one that's working across the whole product types, where others we see very specific, even to a sector, to a size of businesses. So what we're finding generally, though, some providers are now moving away from some of the larger spaces, those sort of traditional, sort of more serviced office providers, because when you're up against the landlord in some ways, and you're not getting a wholesale price for the space, that you're adding value to,
Yeah.
it's really hard competing directly with them. And so we've seen some providers actually move back to the roots of going actually more those roots of a business centre, where for businesses of a certain size, up to before they get really big and sort of 30 plus and they've got their own culture and they want their own front door, we're focusing on this part of the market because that's where we can add the most value there, and they're willing
Mhm.
to pay, because that's where we're finding quite a few now are sort of going, actually it's harder in London with so much influx of this managed space to compete when you're up against that landlord, landlords now entering the market. So some of the dynamics have changed, and that's where we're seeing some really great providers saying they're calling it stick to their knitting or staying in their own lane. Quite a few are going, actually they're growing up with their brands and really refining what part of the market they offer, and what part of the market they're serving. I think that, and that's just a part of evolution as opposed to trying to do everything on that side. So yeah, we're seeing definitely, like with providers, I would say, as they're expanding and they're working out sort of scalable systems, data, and where they add the most value, that's where we're seeing it sort of in some ways coming down, where providers are much more, this is, we only do from 20 desks to, I don't know,
Mm.
80. Some providers are there, some are like, oh, we only do under 20 desks. So we're really seeing lots of different providers set out what they're about, or others are sort of saying, no, we're more lifestyle, we're more membership, we've got restaurants, we've got, so it's exciting, but I think it's growing up where now we're seeing much more of these providers knowing
Mhm.
who they are and can articulate it, less of the ones where everybody, saying, oh, we're for all businesses, any shapes or sizes, any sectors and stuff. We're seeing evolution in some ways. This all goes back to clear, knowing who your customers are, being able to have metrics and data to know, you know, how long your customers stay, the average lifetime, and their value as well, as opposed to occupancy or any of those sort of arbitrary metrics and a bit of vanity
Yeah.
metrics. We're
Yeah.
seeing really the
Exactly. Yeah.
sanity metrics coming about now, and that's just natural evolution. I just see it all as part of this constant, moving the industry forward, and hence I'm totally with sort of having this discussion about co-working stuff and all getting behind going, what does it mean? Because in the UK, it's taken on quite a different meaning from the rest of Europe and the US.
Yeah, if you take Denmark or Sweden, they speak about office hotels, and it
Yeah.
was just the usual name they were using for to you know point to a business center back in the days. And indeed, but again, it seems like with some work to do to weave everything together, and at the end of the day, something that the market will understand and see as something as usual as we say, a restaurant or hotel under the codes, how it operates and what fits your requirements based on your own experience, I guess.
And we're getting much more to the consumer end of the market as well, where and transparency of information. I think because brokers, especially in London, have played such a vital role in sort of selling office space. What's changing now is sort of Google and algorithm AI and everything, where the customer can have much more data and they want to know who's who in the market and choose between the different providers. And that thirst for knowledge is also changing the dynamic. Whereas before it wasn't so important, but now, you know, we've got to be able to explain it. So our AI agents can also interpret it and know exactly what to serve us up as well.
Brilliant. So we are arriving at the end of this conversation. We have two questions that we try to have also within the C20 kind of podcast range with Juicy. First of all, what would you say to Zoe 5 years ago? What was something that 5 years ago you saw or expected or did that, with respect, you say, okay, it was the right thing, or maybe I should have done it differently, or I was wrong maybe about something I thought would happen.
So 5 years ago,
Yeah,
Space
of course, it
Places,
was COVID, etc. But
yeah.
yeah, still.
So Spaces to Places was set up 6 years ago, and so 1 year in the business. I think the critical one for me was just focusing down in the flex office sector and really, and that was a journey there, of niching down and focusing and going, actually, that's the best thing sometimes. So even though you don't want to say no to different pieces of work, but because my passion's placemaking, all property sectors, I've worked across all property sectors as well, really to establish yourself in a market. I've come from big corporate world and stuff where you can go after fancy clients, you can do it, but starting grassroots, really getting to know an industry. So 5 years ago, I would say, yeah, stay with it. You are doing the right thing, because I was sort of then working on a lot of co-living projects, quite similarly in the build to rent, area, because that was the alignment of my skill set. And actually saying, no, I'm just going to focus on flex office, sector, not get pulled away, because I've previously worked in retail and hotels on other sectors, really sort of fine tune my craft in the flex office sector. That's what I say. It was the right move, but at the time, it's always those risky ones where,
Yeah.
going, actually, I'm going to specialize, in an area.
Yeah,
So
focus. Yeah,
yeah,
indeed.
focus. Hence the name Spaces to Places, because previously it was that passion for me with placemaking and making great places. Hence it was all sectors, but actually fine tuning. And that's what I think all businesses, it's okay to say no to some customers and really focus on the highest value that you offer.
Yeah, I love your name. I told you already. I think it's a great name. It tells everything about it at the end of the day. And the last question, what do you expect how do you see the market industry in 5 years' times? Um, what is your bet? If you had to bet something, you say, okay, it will be like this.
I think we're going to go to 4 days a week. We've got to move to 4 days a week. I think that is my big prediction, that already we're seeing the signs. But going back to, we used to work like 7 days on the farm, being a farmer on the fields. Then we went 6 days in a factory. Then we went to 5 days in an office. Now, we're moving much more to, you know, I would say 4 days, maybe it's less, less there. We're looking at unlimited vacational policies by HubSpot, Virgin, other big players. I think this, world that our time is a commodity and so important. The workspace trend and what I see is, time, the focus on time and making sure people get the best out use of their time when they come into a place. They can turn up at 6 o'clock, and they can turn up at weekends to a workspace as well, and it being much more acceptable, where it's just like however people work. I think that's the one where we'll see much more, and it being acceptable, or working different times as well. But the preciousness of time and making sure with operational real estate that somebody comes in, it's all slick and working, no matter, and they've had even like to hotels, if it's a different workspace that they're working in for this time, they've had that pre-arrival experience. They've had an email saying, all the facilities, how are you going to find everything? We are going to move to much more richer hospitality, but much more, it could 24/7, much more environment that we'll start to move to. And with AI and stuff, I don't know if you're finding my head's mashed now. Sometimes, by the end of the week, I'm working so much more faster. You know, you
Yeah,
can,
I'm productive in the morning,
yeah,
and then yeah. But no, indeed, I agree with you. And of course, the AI dimension will change. Yeah, I assume that you are like everybody of us, and there are things that now I can do much faster because AI is there. And if you multiply that by the number of people who are white collars and working in that kind of industry, yeah, indeed, you see the productivity potential of productivity growth that is phenomenal. No, of course, the risk is that it decreases the value of what we do at the end of the day. If everybody is able to do the same thing, that will be another question and another challenge likely to address, most likely, I guess.
yeah, and it's just getting faster and faster. And I think that's where we look at sort of the calculator suddenly being able to use the calculator, do the equations much quicker and stuff. That's all, it's just the same and stuff.
Yeah.
But it means we're much more less doing the administrative work, but also the strategical work now. We've got to have pure oversight and know, what's happening. So actually, it takes a lot of brain power to go. Actually,
Yeah.
we're much more that. So we're all CEOs now with AI in some way. So I think that's where we just got to look after ourselves more, and hence,
Yeah,
have
definitely.
yeah, wonderful workspaces to bring that human touch there.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you so much, Zoe. So you will be in Berlin in November 19th and 20th for the CoWorking Europe conference. People who want to meet Zoe in real, and those who want to get the hand of the report, it's available on your website, Workspace to Play, from Spaces to Places. We will put the link also in the description. You will be likely at GCUC London, I assume, in October. So lovely speaking with you and catching up, and congrats for all the great data you are raising, because yeah, it's really consistent. It took me some time to go through everything because it was, oh, really a lot of discoveries, and I think yeah, people in our side of the world in Europe will likely see it with big eyes because they would likely to have those some numbers and some data coming up in their own countries. Might be a little bit behind if you compare with what is happening in London, but yeah, UK shows us the way nowadays, I think.
Amazing, and so looking forward to GC and co-working Europe. I'm all booked up and stuff like that, flight, hotel. So yeah, I'll be there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Zoe, and take
Likewise.
care. Bye
Take
bye.
care. Thanks.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.